kind of want to listen to the twin threads of your faith and sexuality. And normally at this point with someone who's had faith in their childhood, I'd ask them if they had a crisis of faith, because lots of people either lose their faith or have a period of wrestling with it in their teens. And I wonder if for you, maybe it wasn't at all related to your sexuality, but could you just tell me how those two things were unfolding in your teens and maybe your early 20s?
Yeah, there was definitely a schism. And I guess I almost felt like I was being forced to choose. And I chose God kind of all the way through secondary school. I sort of really agonized about this. In fact, when some of my friends, when one of my, my best friend Luke did actually eventually tell me he was gay while we were at secondary school, and we hung around with, a few other people who, also ended up being gay. And I'm sure it's no coincidence that we sort of all found each other at school. I sort of kept myself apart from them almost. I could sort of feel this wedge building, and it was partly a religious one. And I don't think I go into this so much in the book, but I would talk to my best friend about how he reconciled his faith and his sexuality. And I think he made a very binary choice at that time, which was, well, I don't really agree with this religious teaching, and therefore that's me done with it. And I sort of stuck with it right through until university, where I just knew from the moment I first told someone that I was gay and woke up the next day having been in floods of tears in the kitchen at the house I was living with. And I'd spoken to one of my very best friends about it. And it was sort of a late night. I'd been out, so I'd had a few to drink, which is probably where the honesty came from. And I had gone to bed in sort of floods of tears and full of fear and anxiety about what would happen next. And I woke up the next morning feeling the complete opposite. And it was, as I described earlier, that feeling of total liberation. I felt like the weight of the world had lifted from my shoulders. And I remember looking in the mirror and laughing with relief. And I felt like I was looking in the mirror and finally recognized the person that was looking back at me. And at that point, I thought, this is absolutely who I am. And I need to work out what this means with everything else and all of my other fears and anxieties, including my faith later. And in fact, my first boyfriend, Ed, who I write about in the book, he shared a letter with me that his priest had sent him, which was basically an affirmation of you don't need to choose between who you are and your faith. And it meant a lot to me that Ed shared that letter with me. But I wasn't entirely convinced still at that point. I think it's taken me a lot longer, and I've worked through, and for years and years when people would ask me about this, I'd say, I'm still working through this. This is not easy. And all I can tell you is that, I don't think I've chosen to be gay. In fact, I spent years and years and years and years choosing not to be. And it's harmful and painful. And I think it's one of the reasons why lots of young LGBT people, and actually adults as well, really struggle with their mental health, because it is very, very time consuming and painful and damaging trying to be someone you're not. So I'd sort of come to the conclusion, I think this is who I am. I think this is how I've been made. And I think that, therefore, whether or not Leviticus means what Orthodox teaching means, I think that's secondary. I think I know in my heart where I sit. And then more recently, one book that I think has been, really, really inspirational in terms of my faith and theology was Michael Corran's The Rebel Christ. I think it's a brilliant book, rooted in, I think, scripture and an understanding of scripture that will be highly contested within, within my church, the Church of England, and across Christian churches in the UK and around the world. But it is a brilliant and I think compelling case for kind of what the real lessons of Jesus were and how we ought to live our lives, which I found both inspirational and challenging, actually, in terms of my work. So that's been helpful, I think. But it's still, as I think all of us would say who are Christians, that, you know, your relationship with God is meant to be difficult. It's not meant to be easy. We haven't been given this easy path. So, but I'm still working through it. I describe myself as a practicing Christian, practicing and still not very good at it.